Hi everyone, I'm Joanna Penn from thecreativepenn.com, and today I'm talking to Clare Edwards about professional speaking for creatives and other introverts. Hi Clare!
Hey Joanna, how are you?
I am good, and it's so good to talk to you about this. So first up, why don't you start by telling us a bit more about you and also about your business?
Thank you. Joanna, my business is called ChangeWorks, and when I speak mainly on anything related to making change work. So, in the field of positive psychology, I look at helping people to go from sort of survive to thrive in change, anything to do with thriving in change, helping people develop resilience, helping people develop optimism. And I think that really was born from many years of working with a large IT company, a large software company, where I saw the people who really struggling through change. You know, they'd spend all this money on the software, on implementing the software, and then the poor people on the other end who were really struggling with the change. And then aside from that, I also have a love of story and storytelling. So I also speak on storytelling in leadership, although I've still to deliver a keynote on that.
No, fantastic. And I mean, we met when I was in Australia, and we were both at National Speakers, and you
Yeah.
were the one who actually set me on this course about introversion because, we were at a conference, and I said to you, I really feel my energy is sucked out of me amongst this, and you basically said to me, that's because you're an introvert, and it was the first time I'd really thought about that. So I wondered if you would start by, kind of recapping that. What is your definition of introversion, or who is an introvert?
Yeah. My definition of introversion is someone for whom, when they need to re-energize themselves, when they need to recharge their energy batteries, they need to go inwards, either to spend time alone or to spend time internally. And it's absolutely critical because, as you say, the more time you spend interacting in the outer world, whether that be speaking or delivering, facilitating, it's those energy interactions where extroverts like me will say, oh, yes, please, some more, some more, some more, give me some more, give me some more. And that energizes me. And it's doing exactly the opposite to introverts. So I think it's critical that introverts are aware of this, or aware of that, us extroverts are the little energy suckers. And for them, of course, they can spend extroverted time. I think there's actually, probably, I don't know, more than 50% of speakers are introverted. However, it's about them honoring themselves and their need to re-energize alone. And I think also in terms of introverts as speakers, I think it can work for them in a way. If you think about it, Joanna, you can be one person on a stage speaking to 1,000 people, and you have that distance between you and the stage. You can create a persona for yourself. I mean, think about how many music stars are introverts. I think the challenge comes, though, when they have to interact with the public afterwards, or they're networking and they're in these crowds. And it's just like, whoa, it's time to retract.
Mm. No, I think you're right, and that when you're actually speaking, you're actually almost on your own, in a way. You're kind of not having to deal with the overstimulation. I think that's another thing about introversion for me. It's the overstimulation. So like parties and noise, like the conference we were at. There was so many people and so many potential conversations. It was
Yeah.
very overwhelming. So that's brilliant. So I wanted to obviously, probe how you do speaking, because you're a real expert, and be doing this for a long time. So tell us a bit more about the types of professional speaking that you do. So
Yeah.
keynotes, workshops. What do you do?
Okay, I do keynotes. That's probably the least amount of speaking work that I do. I think what I'm finding now, Joe, I don't know if it's the same in the UK or in the US, is that people attend being spoken to for 45 minutes, and more of the audience interaction and the audience involvement. And I actually much prefer this anyway. So it's almost like delivering a live workshop, which, for an introvert is going to be extremely challenging. However, it really delivers that value by the end of the actual presentation. So I facilitate workshops. When I'm speaking, I think I'm primarily speaking for professional organizations, management organizations, education establishments, universities, speaking on my topic. And then after the conference, that gives me also an opportunity to follow up with the more detailed, maybe, change management type stuff or change facilitation. So yeah, primarily for professional organizations, for larger businesses, and yeah, that's about it.
And workshops. No, fantastic. Right, so you mentioned there, let's take a workshop, for example. Can you, let's talk through the actual process of doing a workshop. So, and we'll come back to selling it later on. But once you've, once you've agreed a topic for a company, say, how does the process work for you?
Okay, so let me take you through the process of a workshop that I'm actually delivering tomorrow. So it's for a large university. I have developed a relationship with this university. So my contact is in HR, and she's dealing with her clients. So we got together and they basically shared with me the challenge that the team is facing. So they have a team at the moment that's quite dysfunctional. So the criticality for me is obviously in the questions, is to understand the nature of the challenges, the differing personalities, give me examples of where they've been struggling with things, and then to get absolute clarity on the outcomes. So what do you want this to deliver? And this can also be a challenge, Joe, setting expectations with clients. I don't know if you've experienced the same thing, but they want a one-day workshop they want me to sprinkle their magic dust over the team. And so it's about me creating realistic expectations and outcomes for the client. So I spend about an hour to an hour and 15 really taking down notes, trying to understand the situation. Then I'll go home and reflect on that. And then I will look at the various processes that I have, the various interventions, the different tools that I have, and I start matching the process to build an agenda. So, for example, one of the things that the team tomorrow wants to work on is getting clarity of roles and responsibilities. And knowing that our brains love simplicity, and our brains love things like acronyms. So I've created a process that has an acronym for them to be able to remember. So we're going to go through that process. And so it's really just, and then working to and fro. I've probably had about 6 different interactions with the client now, refining the agenda, refining the outcomes, setting their expectations. The other thing is think about your communication process in advance, because as human beings, we seek certainty. It's a critical social need. So you don't want to be springing surprises on the group. So I sent a copy of the agenda in advance. Actually, what I did with this team is I created a little survey, an online survey, and said, these are the things we're looking at covering. What's the most important to you? Let them get that involvement. Let them have their say and that certainty. And so that's how...
Yeah.
Sorry.
I was going to say, I always do a questionnaire as well. As far as possible, I think a questionnaire to the participants is a really good idea, because sometimes they come up with stuff that you just wouldn't have thought of.
And that's exactly what they did do. Though the question number 4, there were only 4 questions on the survey. Question number 4 was, is there anything else that we hadn't considered? And about 80% of the team came back with this particular thing that they wanted to work on. And it's ended up being about a 2-hour element of the workshop. Exactly. So they've got buy-in to that.
Yeah, and that's fantastic.
Yeah. So I'll facilitate the workshop tomorrow. I'll invest quite a lot of time in setting the scene, explaining, again, setting expectations, the outcomes that they can expect from the day, and then we run the workshop, and then I always finish on action plans. What is it that they're going to do differently? I'm a facilitator. I'm not a magician. So it's, when we're looking at workshops, this is a start of an ongoing process, whether they keep me involved or not. That's irrelevant. It's not trying to keep business, but it's about the client getting the value from the time that we've spent together.
No, that's fantastic. So I want to, wind it back and go a bit more in depth. So we've talked a bit about the questionnaire. So then, do you prepare a PowerPoint deck? How do you, these days, we're kind of the death by PowerPoint thing. How do you balance death by PowerPoint versus content speaking, that type of thing?
That's really interesting. So it's definitely on a case-by-case basis. Tomorrow, I haven't created a PowerPoint because it's very much workshopping what we're doing, working through processes and delivering stuff. But I have created a workbook for them with lots of visuals in the workbook. When I speak, and I hope I'm not digressing too much here, but when I speak, 90% of the time I will use PowerPoint, and that's because, remember, we're catering to differing learning styles. So if somebody has got a predominant learning style of learning visually, and they're very, very low on auditory, there's a potential that I can lose them. So, and there's a number of points that I'd love to make about PowerPoint or Keynote or whatever you use. The first thing is that I invest in visuals, primarily in visuals. So a lot of time, a lot of money, sourcing the right images. And there's actually a speaker who I've learned from here in Australia, Tony Ryan, who says, use your own photos. We've all got beautiful photos, and there's no problem with IP there. Use your own photos as well. And then I'll just use a tiny bit of text, maybe a number for effect, or a single word. That's my second point, is we cannot and must not, as speakers, think of PowerPoint as a memory aid. You've got to know your content. You've got to know the sequence of your slides. It looks so unprofessional when you see a speaker moving the slide and then talking about it, moving the slide and then talking about it. You know that they don't know what's coming up next. So it's about, think about what your audience needs. It's always going to be what your audience needs. I spoke for 40 minutes at a breakfast last week up in northern Queensland, and I decided just to share my story. And you could hear a pin drop. Horses for courses.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And you also mentioned a workbook there. Is that, and I guess with the PowerPoint too, do you have this mass of material that you then take bits out of, per client and reshape that? And how long does it take you to prepare that type of thing?
Longer than we charge the client for is mainly the answer. Some things I have to create from scratch. For example, last week I ran a public workshop on the fear of public speaking. I ran it up in Mackay, and I had this beautiful workbook all ready to go because I'd written it for a client last year, and I delivered it a couple of times. However, I'm now studying neuroscience, or the neuroscience of leadership. And there was such amazing information that I've learned that I decided to change 50% of the workbook and 50% of the presentation as well. However, I now have an excellent piece of intellectual property, of material that I can reuse. So it is about working smart, but it's also about customizing for the client and getting that balance. And I think my advice to everyone would be to remember to charge for your preparation. Just because you happen to be speaking on stage, you're not charging for 45 minutes. You're charging for all those years of experience. You're charging for all that preparation, all that practice. And that's absolutely key and critical to remember. So, when you're thinking about your pricing, make sure that you're charging for your preparation too.
Right, so, and again, I want to come back to before the event, because I think preparation is such a big thing. So we've prepared the material, we know our client. Now, before I speak, I have a little ritual. I write affirmations in a diary. I make sure I take some painkillers. I make sure I've had a day on my own. That I have to manage my energy in that way. Or sometimes I listen to loud music to try and actually pump up my energy. As an introvert, what are the types of what do you do before you actually speak?
Okay, the first thing I do is I record my presentation on my phone. And I listen to it, and I listen to it, and I listen to it wherever I'm driving. I've probably listened to it about at least 20, 25 times before I'm delivering it. Unless, of course, I get one day's notice to do something. And it's not that I want to speak verbatim, but I really want to get it embedded into my neurology so that I can come across as spontaneous. So I will do that. I will recheck my slides. I'll check the transition of my slides. I print out my slides in full. I print out my slides with notes. I print out my slides, 3 slides to a page, and I write notes. I write my presentation. So I've probably got about 5 different ways of having created this to embed it into my neurology. In terms of preparation just before I speak, the ladies' loo is my haven.
Yeah, I go to the toilet a lot.
And I'm not religious, but I say a little prayer, and the little prayer is around letting go of the ego. I just say, please, let me be the greatest messenger that I can be so that the people hearing my message get what they need to hear. It's not about me. It's not about me. And then I have another little ritual. It's actually a new ritual that I've created from my neuroscience. Do you want me to run through it? It's about nerves.
Yeah, brilliant.
Is that okay? Okay. So, and I actually delivered this to my participants in the workshop last week on the fear of public speaking. I love acronyms. I've got the acronym of LION. Okay. So I actually, when I was speaking it, I was using the metaphor of the Wizard of Oz. And the lion wanted?
Courage.
Can you remember? The lion wanted courage. That's right. And he got a medal. And so I pre-frame it with all of that. Now, what the lion stands for is L stands for label. And it's actually been proven through putting people through functional magnetic resonance imaging scans that when we actually name how we're feeling, what it does is it actually dims down our emotional brain, and it helps to transfer the processing to our prefrontal cortex, which is where our executive function, which is the rational, logical thinking. Even so, do you remember the saying, you've got to name it to tame it? That's exactly what this is. So I spoke at National Speakers last Tuesday, and I got really nervous just before I went on. And I just closed my eyes. You can do this silently. And I said, nervous. Really nervous. And that's it. You don't analyze it. You don't go into it. You just name it. The I stands for interesting. When we can become an observer and just say, nervous. How interesting. Well, it's just my brain. How interesting. It's my brain. The O stands for origin, and this is just maybe exploring a little bit the origin of where this has come from. So what came up for me last Tuesday speaking at National Speakers was, okay, that comes from Mrs. Redmond making me sing a hymn in grade 8 and everybody laughed at me. And then the N stands for new meaning. It's like an instant reappraisal, an instant reframe. How can I find a new meaning to this? And I said, okay, kiddo, you're not in grade 8 anymore. It's time to shine. And I could just do that all internally. And I gave a little roar, a little silent internal roar to myself. So yeah, ritual is my toilet ritual, my little prayer. And now I've added my lion.
And well, let's talk about nerves since we're on that. So I do spend a lot of time in the toilet, actually, emptying as such, which is a physical manifestation of nerves, and so I know I am nervous, and I also have to drink, but the stupid thing is I have to drink water because I get dry mouth as well. So I'm making the whole thing worse. But I often, my affirmation is similar to your little prayer. It's a, thank you that today I can give the best value I can type of thing.
Yeah.
But on the nerves thing, I had someone else explain it to me as Shakti, as energy, that to speak you have to have extra energy, and if you reframe the nerves as energy that you need to speak, then you need it, and if you don't have it,
absolutely,
yeah,
it's that. We think of stress in the negative terms. We think of stress as distress, but remember that stress, we have eustress as well. And that's what we need. Can you imagine going on stage and saying, "Oh, good afternoon, everybody. I'm so thrilled to be here." And it's the fuel. It's that energy is your fuel. However, for some people, it can get away with them. And for me, I would say to deal with nerves, I'd say educate yourself, understand what your brain is doing to you, because basically, our brain this is the old primitive part of our brain that houses the amygdala, the emotional center. It doesn't know the difference between a speaking crowd or an audience and any other threat to our life. It really does think that we are in danger of our life, and it wants us to get us the hell out of there. And we have to override this. We have to find ways of thinking, and that's why we get dry mouth, because that's all part of the fight or flight syndrome. We don't need to have saliva. You see, our digestive system closes down, which is why we don't need saliva, which is why we have dry mouth. And we know about, the blood flow is taken away from the internal organs, which is why we get butterflies in our tummy. So we don't want to get rid of the nerves. We don't want to get rid of the butterflies, but it's an old speaker's saying, we want to get them flying in formation.
That's a good one. So I think importantly there is to say that the nerves happen. They happen for pretty much every professional speaker, every actor, everybody. But you just have to learn to live with them.
Yeah, I think, Jo, the day we stop getting nervous as speakers is the day that we hang up our speaking hats. It really is. I think because that's when complacency will set in.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, well then let's talk about the actual speaking event itself. So you arrive at the event. What do you do about the practicalities around mic, around the IT, around the whiteboard, all of that type of stuff?
Yes, I've learned from failure here. I've learned from a lot of stuff-ups. The first thing I'd say is if you can be there for the whole day, then get yourself there for the whole day. I really have a little bit of a dislike for fly-in, fly-out speakers. I think, you can get great value from listening to the speakers who were on before you. And in fact, actually, if I can just share, last week, I was speaking at the Australian Institute of Management, and the speaker before me covered one of the same processes that I was going to cover. And it gave me the opportunity to change my presentation. So that's one of the key benefits of actually being there for as much as possible, and also, of course, for networking. Practicalities. Never, 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 never assume anything. Always check everything. I'll just share you a little example. I was doing a keynote. It was the biggest one I've ever done. It was 500 people, and I'd worked so hard on this keynote. I'd adapted it to the theme of the conference, which was heroes. And at the end of my keynote, we had this beautiful montage of pictures of all of the staff. And accompanying it was Search for a Hero Inside Yourself by M People. Now, my client I'd given everything on a USB. My client had told me that everything was fine. We come to the finale, we come to the crescendo, and there's deathly silence. Now, this is where you have to fake it till you make it. I couldn't let the audience know that there was an amazing song accompanying those photos, and they just watched them in silence. And I thought, it's not that you don't trust, but you have to check everything for yourself. It's absolutely critical. Microphones, I think everybody's different with microphones. They say that the best microphone is a handheld, but I struggle. You can tell, it's hard for you to keep me in check on this video, isn't it? I'm so extroverted. I speak with my hands. Can you imagine? I've got a slide advancer in one hand, a microphone in the other hand. I'm completely handicapped. So I do like head or lapel mics. I spoke in Sydney a couple of weeks ago, and a lady had a dangly earring like mine now, and it kept hitting the mic. And she was, I think, quite nervous and wasn't aware of it. I cannot remember the content of her speech because of this really annoying. So, you have to think of absolutely everything. And I just have lists and lists and lists, and also, preparation for your client. Let your client know what type of microphone you want to use. Find out how many people are going to be there. You might not like I hate microphones, Joe, but then to shout at an audience is unprofessional. It just doesn't come across well. So you do need that voice amplification, regardless of whether you've got a loud or a quiet voice. Things like whiteboards. I always bring my own markers. I always bring my own erasers. Flip chart. You need those nice, thick, fat, chunky pens because otherwise people can't see them. Make sure they haven't dried out. It's that little attention to detail, and it also for yourself. It helps calm your nerves because we're increasing those levels of certainty for ourselves. There's going to be things that we're going to have to deal with that are unexpected. And so the more we can reduce the chance of that happening by being prepared, the better we're going to be.
Okay, so one of the things I think I found as a speaker, as you actually speak, like you mentioned the woman with the earring who didn't seem to be aware because she was so nervous, is that when I started speaking, I don't think I was aware of speaking. It was almost like the time disappeared while I was doing it. And now I'm finding myself more aware as I speak and can be more aware of the audience. Is that something that you've found over time?
I think so. I think that, you can pretend that you're in the zone with the first example that you used, but actually I think that's part of nerves where you haven't got that level of conscious awareness. And, the only way to do this, Joe, is to speak and to speak and to speak and to speak. You have to keep speaking. The more you speak, the more conscious you can become. And then the more, I think, flexible you can be. So, look, don't beat yourself up if you missed some things in the structure of what you were going to speak about. Don't beat yourself up if you weren't able to go off on a tangent. I think that comes with practice and with expertise. Remember, the more spontaneous and natural somebody appears, the more hundreds of hours they've put into that. Let me give you an example. I don't know if you've heard of Dr. Brené Brown. Mm-hmm. She's, watch her TED Talk. She's absolutely phenomenal. I saw her speak in Sydney 2 weeks ago. It sounded like she just came on the stage and had a conversation with us. I was able, because I was speaking at the same event, I spoke with someone who knew her, and that woman said, 10,000 hours, more like 20,000.
Yeah.
So we have to remember that, and that's why for people starting out wanting to speak, grab every opportunity you can. I have spoken at Lions, at Rotary, at Zonta, at networking breakfasts. I've spoken where there's only been 3 people. And every time you just get that little bit more conscious of what it is you're doing. And it also raises your confidence, I think, to go off on a tangent. Do you know what the 3 things that people look for in a speaker?
You tell me.
One of them is spontaneity. Spontaneity, vulnerability, and authenticity. Yeah? So do not be a separate character on stage. Don't be this amazing, vulnerable person on stage and then walk off and refuse to speak to people afterwards, or be some sort of haughty, arrogant person. Be who you are. But the spontaneity is, you but you can plan spontaneity too. You can plan spontaneity with your voice. You can be saying something and say, oh, gosh, that reminds me of a story. Would you mind if I tell you a story? Bam, you're in there with your planned spontaneity.
And it's funny, I mean, you mentioned authenticity, and in fact that was part of the reason for doing this book. It was the last time I spoke, well, one of the last times at London Book Fair, and I actually said I had an audience of authors, mostly introverted authors, and I said, I'm an introvert. And you might not believe it. And the amount of feedback I got around actually owning that has been amazing. So tell us a bit more about authenticity and about sharing your personal stories, because I think some people are worried about oversharing, about being too vulnerable to an audience. What's your advice?
I think it's really interesting, and I think it's a delicate balance. And I can give you an example of last week, because last week I spoke for 40 minutes and just told my story. And one of the little strategies that I use is that if I feel I'm getting too emotional into my story, I disassociate. So I try and put an image of me further away. Because, I have had, like most people, a roller coaster life. And there are a couple of parts of my story. I think last week I got a little bit emotional when I talked about, we'd only been in our unit here in Australia for 2 days when I had to fly back to the UK, and my dad passed away. And I was talking about, and my mum had passed away 4 years before that. So I talked about wanting to set up my business in honour of my parents. And my voice broke a little bit. And I apologized. And at the end, everyone came up and said, don't ever, ever apologize for feeling a little bit emotional in that way. I think, though, it is important to have a strategy to bring yourself back so that you don't find yourself going into your story. Our stories are the only things that we have that are unique to us. They are, from a commercial perspective, they are your differentiator. And people want to connect with you as a person. You may be the world's greatest expert on baking scones, but I want to know how you started out. How did you become the world's best scone baker? Where did you stuff up? And this is where the vulnerability comes in. If you're prepared to share your stuff-ups and how you learned from that, it's not just a great connection. You really are honouring the people who are listening to you, because they will go away and learn from that, and learn actually that it's okay to make mistakes, and that's how we learn. So I think, the reaction that you got from sharing that you were an introvert, particularly as an introvert, you're going, da-da, here's my vulnerability. I'm showing myself warts and all. And you give permission for other people to shine in that way.
No, fantastic. Okay, let's get back to the actual speaking. So one of the things, especially with workshops, I'm sure you've had this a lot, there's often the types of people, and there's sometimes these very needy people who kind of try and dominate. There are people who might get a bit argumentative, heckle. How do you deal with running a group of personalities?
Okay, that's a really good question. You manage it in advance as much as possible. Again, you're increasing the certainty for yourself, and you're also helping the group. Then the key to this, Joe, is you have to let the group take control of their own behavior. So, for example, the workshop I'm running tomorrow, I've put together something called a value contract, okay? And I say to the group, now, we're going to be spending a lot of time together today, and there's some elements of the workshop are maybe a little bit emotive, maybe a bit challenging for you. So in order for us to, and use the word us and we a lot, in order for us to move forward as a group, how do you want to work with each other? And I'll give them some scenarios, and I'll say, okay, so what if we end up going down the rabbit warren of detail? And then I'll say to them, well, what permission would you give me as your facilitator? You must get permission first. And then I talk about the dormice and the parrots. And I say, okay, We have a wonderful mixture of introverts and extroverts in the team today. Let's call the introverts dormice. They're taking it all in, they're processing, they're reflecting, but we haven't heard anything from them from the last half an hour. How do you want to deal with the dormice? And they come up with the solution. When they come up with the solution, they own it. And then I say, and on the other hand, we've got some people in the room. Now, I'm not saying there's any people in the room today, because I don't know you. You have a little bit of a laugh with them. And I say, they rather like the sound of their own voice. Now, their intention is always positive, because they're so brimming with ideas and all they want to do is to share them. How would you like to deal with them? And that's when we can have a bit of a laugh. And we use a code word, and I'm happy for your listeners and your readers to use this because it's so effective. The code word is, thank you for your input, which means shut that up. And then the other thing is and this can happen, this is a way of dealing with hecklers as well with speaking. You don't want to take this on for yourself. You're just going to become a target. You use your audience. So say there's someone either in a workshop or in your audience who keeps interrupting. The way that I would tend to deal with it in general is to say, that's a really interesting point, thank you. In terms of being part of the content of what we're talking about today, it's slightly offline. So can I just check in with the audience? Would you like to continue down this subject, or would you like me to work with the gentleman offline later? You know what the answer is. So I'm remaining respectful to my interrupter or my heckler, and the audience has made the decision. So get your audience to work for you.
No, that's fantastic. Yeah. Okay, so you talk there about managing the audience. What about managing your own energy? I mean, I find during a full day workshop that I'm pretty much shaking by the end of the day. I'm so, vibrating at a very high level. That's kind of how I feel. I have to do a number of things to manage that. How do you manage your energy and keep yourself going all day?
Well, remember, I'm an extrovert. So I'm like an Energizer bunny, and I will keep going. I'll keep going. If I recognize that I'm almost going a bit hyper, again, I'll use my executive lounge, the ladies' toilet, and I'll just go in there and I'll quieten myself down. And this is where breathing is so critical, Joanna. We think about, we've got to breathe. Yes, we do have to breathe. It's absolutely critical because, again, we know from neuroscience that it dampens down the limbic system and it ramps up that rational, logical thinking. Once I have spoken, I am good for nothing because I haven't slept the night before. I am yet. So this is, people think, these professional speakers, they just sort of like walk on and do it. No, they don't. I never sleep well the night before I'm speaking. So as soon as I get home, I become the world's biggest introvert. I can't even be with my partner. I'll go and have a bath. I'll listen to some music, some meditation music or something, because I have to return my body to balance. It's like, I think it's like a runner with too much lactic acid. You've got cortisol pumping there, you've got everything pumping, and there is nothing left. Nothing. So I just spend some time for me. I definitely become introverted with that. But on the day, there are little things you can do to manage yourself. I do my 4x4x4 breathing. So I breathe in for 4, I hold for 4, and I release for 4. And it also reminds me to when I'm speaking as well, because you can notice I speak from my chest, I speak quite high, and that's one of the feedback things I get from Toastmasters is to go back down again, and you also deliver with more gravitas to have that deep breathing. And I carry my iPod around with me, so it may well be that I just listen to a little bit of I Love Llewellyn. It's my Reiki music. So and also I do a little bit of self Reiki for those of you who do Reiki. Remember to Reiki yourselves.
Well, no, I think what's interesting there is we have exactly the same energy drop at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So regardless of introvert, extrovert, what you're doing in a speaking day or any speaking is giving to the audience.
Yeah.
So however you get that energy back is kind of important. Well, I'm really glad you said that, because I always feel like, oh, I'm such a, I must be a failure because I die. I have to have a day out afterwards. But you're the same.
If you've got tons of energy left over, then you haven't given enough.
That is a good point. So after you've spoken, a day's gone by, do you get feedback from the participants, from the people? Do you get testimonials? How do you close off the loop?
That's a really interesting question, because remember, we have 2 sets of clients, sometimes 3 sets of clients if you're working with an intermediary. So you've got the person who's paying you the money, and you've got the audience. So what I work out in advance as part of my initial consultation process. I say to the client, would you like feedback from the audience on my presentation? Is that something that you're going to do as part of the conference? So we're helping consult to them. If not, would you like me to create, again, online? I don't think it's fair to ask people to fill out feedback forms on the day. I think they need time to reflect. So, and it's happening more and more now that the client is saying, thank you, yes, we'd really love for you to do that. And so I'll put the little survey together, and I send it to my client, and my client sends it out to the audience. And a little point that I've started to change my feedback, and a little point for you viewers here, again, it's not always about you, is make the first question something about them that they can self-evaluate. So, for example, with my public speaking course, my first question was, as a result of investing in the course today, do you feel A, less confident, B, as confident, or C, more confident in thinking about public speaking? It's a self-evaluation, because otherwise it's all about, the venue and me and blah, blah, blah. So that's a good point. You're going to want a separate evaluation for your client. Oh, and also, sorry, the one for the audience, I often put in a question like, in terms of topics for future conferences, what would you be really interested in? Now, it can be an opportunity for me. It could be an opportunity for one of my associates. But what great information to go back to the client with and say, by the way, next year they would really like to hear about X. So that's the initial feedback. And I think sometimes where introverts can struggle is the thought of going back to the client again. It's like, oh, I've already got money out of them. Am I going to go back and try and get more money out of them? You're honouring them with your service. If they liked you the first time round, if they loved what you had to speak about, then surely the opportunity to help them for a day or a week or a series, as opposed to 45 minutes, is honouring them. So I think it's about getting your mind around, you're not trying to sell. You have something that they want.
No, absolutely. Okay, so let's just switch into the business side. So one of the big questions, of course, is how much do you charge?
Oh my God, a big question. It's the $64 million question.
So how do you evaluate that?
Okay, there isn't a simple formula. There really isn't a simple formula. It's on a case-by-case basis. So I think that the main point I want to make, Joe, is you must ensure that there's a fair exchange of value. It's critical. You must value yourself. So I might speak for free at a not-for-profit, and they might give me access to some key people in the industry and introduce me to some other key people in the industry. I've written a book on storytelling. So if it's appropriate, I will I will say to the customer, look, what we can do is included in my fee, every one of your delegates can get a book as well. And I'm going to give you the book at half price. Okay, so the customer feels that they're getting a good deal. The other critical thing to remember is the customer charging people to come to this conference? Because they will ask you to speak for free. And I'll give you an example of this last week. I've been asked to present a keynote and a half-day workshop for a professional organisation for free in October. And I went back to them and I said, I just want to give you an idea of what's involved in terms of my preparation. And also, can I just ask, do you charge people to come to the breakfast and to the masterclass? And there was big silence. And I said, well, I would love for you to honour me with, a fair exchange of value. They're paying me and they're paying my membership fee for next year.
Oh, good. Good.
So that's really important. My first keynote, I charged $250. The most I've charged is $4,000. Mm-hmm. So it really is horses for courses. I would say try and find out from other people what other people are charging. Certainly that, if they're charging other people. And it's that age-old argument of if you come in too low, they will think that you're not worth it.
Yeah.
If you come in too high, they'll think that you're greedy. So, and it's a lot of people keep things very guarded to themselves. And it's funny you asked me this question because I sent that email out on Monday. I've got a meeting with a prospective client on Thursday. And she wants to have me do a keynote. And it's a professional organisation. It's a big job for me. So I sent an email out to 4 members of the national speakers. And they all came back with something different. But they all came back with the theme of identify where the value is, make sure it's a fair exchange. And actually, there's a lady called Taryn Dean from Corporate Cinderella. I'll send you the link. She's written a superb blog about what to charge. Am I growing in confidence with asking for what I want? Absolutely, I am. I would have no hesitation in now saying I charge $4,500 or $5,000. And this links back to what we were saying before, Joe, is that we're not charging for 45 minutes. When I send out a proposal to prospective clients, I give a list of what's included. At the bottom of my list is 30 years experience of managing people, of managing change, of delivering workshops. That's what they're paying for, not 45 minutes.
Yeah. And I think it's different per industry. So, I mean, authors and literary stuff is a nightmare, absolute nightmare. It's a real industry standard that you do it for free. Corporates, you can charge, right? Companies, yeah. you can charge. So people have to think, what am I getting? Like you say, a value exchange, if there is yes. value in it. No, that's brilliant. And the other question on money there is, you mentioned books. How else do you make revenue as a speaker? Is it just a speaking fee? Is it and books? How else?
For me, the speaking can be a catalyst or enabler to those longer term workshops. So, if you've done a good job and you're with a client who happens, it doesn't even geographically have to be in your area, but I have got so many development workshops as a result of speaking. So it's about thinking about it more laterally. The other thing is my greatest source of income is in asking for those referrals and testimonials from clients, because that will get you more jobs. There is no better branding and marketing than a referral or testimonial from an existing client. Now, all you have to do is just, and I know it can be hard face to face. On the day, if I know, by your gut feeling if it's gone well, I just go up to them and say, how do you think it went? And they'll go, Claire, it was great. They're really, really happy. And I say, thank you so much. That makes my heart sing. would you mind if I just sent you a little email once everything's died down, and I've just got 3 questions. What you engaged me to do, how I did it, and what was the result. That's all, you know, and if you've got the courage to ask that, knowing it went well, they are more than happy to do it for you. I struggle when clients say, look, can you word it and I'll just sign it? That's not authentic for me. I know they're busy, but I can't use that. It has to be their words. So, you know, what you engaged me to do, what I delivered, and what the result was.
Always ask.
And for me, that's the main source of income with regards to speaking. I think, you know, there are speakers out there who just speak for a living. I reckon it's in the 1% now, because people want experts who speak, not speakers. And actually, do you mind if I just say something about the expert thing? Because, and I find this particularly with introverts, they're going to wait until they're qualified enough to speak. Well, you know, if you wait until you're qualified enough to speak in your own opinion, you're going to be on your deathbed with "what if" as your epitaph. You know, there are always people more qualified than you. There are always people more professional than you. There are always people that have, you know, whatever more knowledge than you. But they're asking you. It's your unique personality. Maybe you have a way of connecting with the audience. Maybe you have a sense of humor. Maybe you have a way of translating the message in lay terms. You know, as long as you have done your research, as long as you are giving the client what they want, please don't wait until you think you're qualified enough, because we never will be.
No, exactly. No, I agree with you. And when we met, I guess, well, you were already doing a lot of workshops, and I was really just starting speaking. And you do have to start and just kind of get on with it. But I guess kind of my almost to last question, how do you actually get speaking events? Now, where you are now, obviously you know things have moved on, but how would you suggest new speakers do marketing, and you know, how do they get those initial speaking events?
Okay, so I would say don't be proud. I mean, I joined Toastmasters. It's amazing how many people in Toastmasters are business people or retired business people. So please speak for free, find interest groups, find not-for-profit organizations to be able to practice. I'd say really flesh out your network as well. You know, we go to networking events. Yeah, it's a little bit like the old story, Acres of Diamonds, where the treasure was in the garden at home. Who do you know and who do they know? It's often through those 6 degrees of separation or those loose contacts that we really find people who can help us. So it's back to fair exchange as well. You know, I'm really interested in speaking on, I've written a book on who do you know who might be able to help me. I think social media has been phenomenal. I mean, look at the success that you've had with social media. I spoke at an event in Sydney a couple of weeks ago. The woman who approached me to speak got the job as the creative director for the conference on LinkedIn. So, you know, put a little workshop together. You know, say I'm going to run a public workshop. I'm going to charge, you know, £50 or whatever it is. You put it on Eventbrite or Sticky Tickets or whatever the, you know, system is that you use. You put it on LinkedIn. You do your searches. You know, who's in the London area, who's in the New York area, whoever we are, and you put it out there. I think never has there been a greater opportunity to market. And you know, Joe, I want to kick myself because I was speaking with a speaking coach last week, and I cannot believe I'm sharing this with your listeners. It's such a blinding flash of the obvious. He said to me, have you Googled all the conferences and seminars and events that are coming up for the rest of the year in Brisbane, Melbourne, Sydney? Duh! Duh! I hadn't done it. Of course you do that. You find out, you know, there may be a beautiful little niche seminar happening in the finance sector in London or something, and you happen to be speaking on hedge funds. So, but you've got to be proactive about it. And, most speakers I know these days don't have a big marketing budget. You've got to be clever about it. Use your contacts. I definitely say flesh out that internal network. Get together with other people. Are there people who who speak in complementary ways that you could create? Not a multi-speaker to sell. I don't really like those, but a multi-speaker to add value, where you can charge, $70 or something. You split the difference. Look, you're going to start small. You're going to break even. You're going to lose. But once people see that you are speaking from your heart, and you're delivering value, and you just keep giving and giving, and remember to recharge your batteries, something will happen. It really will. And for me, it's taken 8 years. But, I didn't Google the conferences coming up in the area.
Oh, it's great. So I guess my last question is, how has speaking changed your life, both, I guess, your inner life and also your business life?
Oh, Joe, it has. It's absolutely changed my life. I keep coming back to, it's not about you. You let go of the ego. What is your message? I have a message where I want to help people. I want to help people thrive in change. I want to help people lead a more positive, happy life, become more resilient, understand how to be more optimistic. And I was just thinking about this just as you were speaking. I think it was yesterday or the day before was the anniversary of Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech. Now, he could have written a letter to the Washington Post, but he didn't. And that's what's giving me goosebumps now. If you have a message, you can choose to send it to one person. You can choose to pluck up the courage and say, it's not about me, it's about my message. And if you can deliver that to more people and more people and more people, and the ripple effect, because remember, if you're only speaking on something related to business, say I'm talking about resilience for business, the person who's been on my course or been in the audience is going to go home. They're going to be a more effective partner, a more effective parent, a more effective sibling, whatever. Stay focused on your message, and and you're onto a winning streak, I promise. Don't give up.
Fantastic. Right, so where can people find you and your books? Just tell us about that online.
They can find me. There's a couple of areas where they can find me. So my ChangeWorks website is change-works.com.au, and my storytelling workbook is a sprinklingofmagic.com.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for your time, Claire. That was brilliant.
I loved speaking with you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity, Joe. I love what you're doing. Get your message out there.